The riots that erupted in the UK in July triggered a debate between the right winger and the left wingers, with the left wingers believing that it is because of the fact that the real contribution of the people or immigrants or the people of colored races has not been highlighted in an effective way. For instance, they say that during the First and Second World War, more than 4 million South Asian served in the army, besides millions, from West Africa, West Africa, East Africa, and Caribbean as well. So I'm just trying to put those both arguments, and you can make up your own mind. I can just do it in four episodes. So I'll start with the argument. Many people across the world were surprised by the recent riots in the UK that plunged a number of areas into chaos, with far right activists, according to some critics, unleashing a reign of terror in several regions by attacking mosques, asylum centers, and immigrants' homes. The riots have triggered a debate, according to critics, about the role of social media in sowing disharmony, uh, because this all started with a fake news on social media, hate mongering, integration, the political system, multiculturalism, distortion of history, and underlying socioeconomic factors which paved the way for violence witnessed following a stabbing incident on July 29. It may be mentioned on that day a Taylor Swift themed holiday club on Hard Street in the country's Southport area was attacked, leading to three girls under the age of 10 being killed and 10 other people being wounded. After the incident, activists from far right groups attacked a mosque, burned vehicles, and damaged properties. Besides staging violent protests, um, in several parts of the country. Counter protests were also held in several parts of the UK, leading to violence in some areas. Many critics claim that the government took swift actions, and they say that the government carried out swift arrest, with many writers being sentenced. Many believe that the quick action of the government acted as a deterrent, preventing far right groups from creating more mayhem. But critics say these prompt actions did not deter ultranationalists from staging protests in Belfast and some other areas of the country, suggesting that the state would also have to carry out some real socioeconomic reforms to thwart reoccurrence of such incidents. It is claimed that distortion of history and manipulation of fact is one of the factors contributing to such situations. Left wing politicians accuse radical nationalists of employing these tactics to fuel hatred, which, of course, right wingers vehemently oppose and vehemently refute. They argue that the far right ideologues like Stephen, Christopher Yaxley Lennon, known as Tommy Robinson, and Reform UK Party leader Nigel Farage never bothered to mention the contribution of immigrants towards the protection and betterment of the British society. They raised this question, for instance, how many British people know about the tremendous sacrifices rendered by these people of the colonies during World War One and World War Two for the UK. Citing historical accounts, they claim over 3 million soldiers and laborers served the country during the two terrible conflicts of the 20th century. Some suggest even a higher number. For instance, according to colorfulheritage.com, over 4 million soldiers from the subcontinent alone fought during these wars. Out of these soldiers, 1.5 million fought during World War One, which included 800,000 Hindus, 430,000 Muslims, and 100,000 Sikhs, 55,000 Gurkhas. Gurkhas are the people from Nepal, and they are like warrior like people, and 115,000 others. At least 74,000 were killed while fighting for the empire, and 100,000 got injured. The empire did recognize their sacrifices to some extent, awarding 11 Victoria Cross medals to some of those fighting for the country. Some historians claim that not only did the people of South Asia fight physically, they also made financial contributions, coming up with the much needed resources without which the fighting would have been an uphill task. It is estimated that the financial contribution was around somewhere, 479 million British pound, totaling to around 25 billion pound in today's money. During World War II, people from present day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal made even greater sacrifices with around 2.5 million people participating in the war, around 1 million Hindus, 600,000 Muslims, 150,000 Sikh, and 560,000 others fought along with British troops. Around 87 of them died during the war, while 150,000 got injured. These countries also contributed 1.3 billion British pound, which in today's money, according to some experts, amounts to a whopping 53 billion pound. It is not only in non-English historians or immigrants who make claims about their sacrifices, but British institutions also recognize such sacrifices. For instance, according to the National Army Museum's website, over 3 million soldiers and laborers from across the British Empire and Commonwealth served alongside the British Army during World War One. Around 15,000, quote, around 15,000 West Indians enlisted, including 10,000 from Jamaica, others from Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, the Bahamas, British Honduras, Belize, Grenada, British Guyana, the Leeward Islands, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. Quote, and it says, the same museum's website says soldiers from the Indian subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, made a decisive contribution to the struggle against the Central Powers. Two infantry and two cavalry divisions had arrived on the Western Front by the end of 1914, and eventually 140,000 men saw service there. So they served 140,000 served there. Soldiers and laborers from these countries served across the world for the UK. Quote, in 1915, Indian troops arrived in the Middle East where they fought against the Ottoman Turks in Palestine and Mesopotamia, Iraq. That same year, soldiers from the Indian Army fought alongside British, Australian, and New Zealand troops on the Gallipoli Peninsula. They also formed a large proportion of the Allied forces occupying former enemy territory in East Africa, the Balkans, Asia Minors, and Caucasus. In total, 1.27 million Indians voluntarily served as combatants and laborers. The same website, also talks about the crucial role played by African soldiers in containing the Germans who were threatening British security. Quote, African troops played a key role in containing the Germans in East Africa and defeating them in West Africa. Europeans and Indians struggled in the harsh African climate, but the local inhabitants had the skills to survive and prosper. Quote, by November 1919, the British Army in East Africa was mainly composed of African soldiers. The units involved were the West African Frontier Force drawn from Nigeria, the Gold Coast, Ghana, and Sierra Leone, and the King's African Rifles recruited from Kenya, Uganda, and Malawi. At least 180,000 Africans also served in the Career Corps in East Africa and provided logistic support to troops at the front. Around 25,000 black Africans were also recruited in the South African native labor contingent that served on the Western Front in 1916 and 1917. India offered the biggest military contribution to the British during these conflicts, and within India, it was Punjab that made the largest contribution. For instance, according to Santanu Das, professor of modern literature and culture at Oxford University and a senior fellow at All Souls College, Oxford, quote, in 1914, India had one of the largest voluntary armies in the world. Of the 27,522 new recruits enlisted in India between August and December 31, 1914, 13,400 were from Punjab alone. The total number of men to have served from Punjab, including the British districts and Indian states, by the end of the war was 480,000, including 410,000 combatants and 70,000 non combatants. Quote continues. Of the 282,170 combatants recruited from Punjab from 1915 until 1918, some 156,300 were Muslims, some 63,900 were Hindus, and 61,970 were Sikh, though the last religion group, the Sikh, comprised only 12% of the population, like British India population at the time. In August 1914, Punjab, including British districts and princely states, had 100,000 men in its armies, including 87,000 combatants and 13,000 non combatants. By the end of the war, Punjab had contributed one third of all the Indian recruits and over 40% of the total number of Indian combatants mobilized. So that's their contribution in the war. That has been also recognized by historians. A project working on the role of Punjabis in World War One has digitized and transcribed the service record of approximately 320,000 Punjabis who served in World War One. According to the BBC, during the World War One, the British Empire, quote, the British Empire and dominions raised a total of 858,000. Sorry, it's more than that. It seems to be more than 8 million. So, more than 8 million men for military service, more than 5 million came from British ISILs, 1400 100 1.4 million, more than 1.4 million from India, 629,000 from Canada, 413,000 from Australia, 136,000 from South Africa, 128,500 from New Zealand, and more than 134,000 from other colonies. So, this is part one of the series talking about contribution of immigrants, and I'll come up with part two as well.